teach it, but in just the act of collage making, is there greater value in knowing?
Well, nobody works in a vacuum, so I think it's always instructive to understand that whatever it is that you're doing in any discipline, you are operating within a tradition. And I think the more you know, the more it enriches your own work, because you can see where there are connections, where you're jumping, where you're moving away from something, where you might be opening up a new territory. I think in fields like painting, drawing, etc., there's very little new under the sun. But I think with all these new tools that have been coming to us in rapid succession, I think there really is this huge challenge ahead for artists, architects, and cultural workers of every stripe, to understand how to take these technologies and similarly carve out a new experience, a new art experience, a spatial experience, a tactile experience, whatever it is. But I feel that in the same way that the turn of the 20th century was this huge cultural shift and artistic shift, we're right in the thick of it now. And I don't think we're deep enough into the new thing, whatever that thing is, to fully understand yet how to make it sing, But that's what keeps the culture interesting.
Well, I think that the nature of precedent is critical, right? You would never take on painting without understanding. You can't take on painting without understanding the history of painting. I mean, especially in kind of abstract terms. But we have 500 years of painting to work with. And that's what's so incredible about this exhibit and what you talked about last night in your work of going to a bookstore and only finding 6 books on all the books on collage. That in this room potentially is kind of the collective idea of what collage is at this moment. It's 1913, World War I, Modernist Manifesto, 1923, make something new. 80 years is the length at which we're working with in terms of the precedent of collage, and what Pavel's worked on is basically chronicling that. So when we look at the precedent of collage, I wonder if it's for one, it's a dramatic cultural shift, the idea of World War I and what happened. It's such a critical break. I mean, if something snapped completely visually. And so the precedent isn't, I don't think, a clean line to begin with. So I don't know if you looked at what came directly before in terms of the moments that led up to collage and issues of cubism and Duchamp's drawings that you were talking about last night and Picasso and Braque, but how useful that is, or if the precedent of collage is the present tense. More so. I mean, how important precedent is to understand one's own craft. Again, it's having something to say. So I think, again, we also talk about art and collage, but we leave out issues of music and literature, and that's one thing that's perhaps not in the discussion in terms of precedent that also gets of what happened post-World War I in all disciplines in terms of new ways of thinking and issues of kind of postmodern thought.
I mean, I agree that you obviously have to know at least a good part of the history that you're interested in, what you're putting on paper or putting in the Ethernet or, whatever it is that you're doing with it. Without Marinetti, we wouldn't have had Wolfgang Dungart or April Bryman. And it's unfair to yourself, I guess, to be making stuff and not knowing where you're picking it up from, right? In history, I heard a quote recently at a design show that they said, history doesn't repeat itself, it's a rhyme. And I really liked that because, it's not that it's the same thing, but it's something that is parallel.
It's self-reflexive.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful way to encapsulate that idea. And then combining things together, participation, for instance, participatory design is a popular endeavor right now, right? So, but you shouldn't think about doing that before you know something about you know, what the Dadaists did, or what John Cage did, or, you know, how that history comes to play with an audience, so.
Oh, yeah, you don't know the history. Like, yes.
Just to add one thing to that, I think that it's funny, when I was in graduate school, and I remember reading some of the contemporary critiques of the Impressionists, and I was so struck by the sort of attacks on artists like Manet, references to his figures looking pasted on, or Monet's fragments of landscape, and so much of the critical language that was used to sort of diminish those artists was actually the same critical language of collage that was in all these books that I had read as a sort of newbie to the subject, and so even when I always think of there's a wonderful portrait of Zola by Manet that's in the the one that's in the old train station in Paris. Pardon? The Musée d'Orsay. Thank you. Good. Non-senior, senior moment. And there's a kind of trompe l'oeil of the bulletin board in the background, and it's really a kind of collage, that picture, and so I actually think a lot of talking about history, I think so many of the seeds of what happened less than 20 years later were right there in those kinds of pictures. So yeah, history, very important. And I think it gives us and that was really very much the conception of the ICC, was that as we're going deeper into this new territory, and because so much of this new territory looks like collage, we should sort of know this narrative better and differently, because it's different than the narrative of painting, or the traditional narrative about architecture, etc. You know, it ties it all together. Music.
Pavel, you mentioned this last night in your lecture, and Brian touched on it again today, about the motivation for these transformations in the invention of collage and in different techniques as being motivated by political instability at points, but also by technological innovation. And as an example, the proliferation of mass-produced images following the invention of and advances in photography led to photo montage. And at that point, the replication of the photograph prompted Walter Benjamin to talk about the question of authenticity. And he said the presence of the original is the prerequisite to the concept of authenticity. So he was essentially saying that the work's uniqueness in time and space was its validation or justification. So essentially now that digital methods are starting to be employed in collage making, how can we talk about that concept of authenticity?
Well, I think we have to just reframe it. I mean, again, I think it's just about reframing that idea, and finding a new vocabulary for it. I'm not sure that I'm such a materials guy that I'm still trying to process what I think that transformation means for me. And again, I'm still at a place where I feel like a lot of what's happening digitally leaves me wanting, because of the loss of that sort of the loss of that direct experience. I'm not so caught up about things like authorship and originality and all of that, but I just think because now the role of the viewer has changed, and the way the layers between the viewer and the so-called original are mediated differently. I don't know. I think those are still things that have to be articulated. I don't know that I have a firm answer to that as yet.
Could you say indifference towards some of that? I mean, there's something you said at the beginning about architecture being an accumulated experience, And I don't know how it all fits together, but if you think about Facebook, you become indifferent when you see the posts that are like, did you see what happened in Syria today? Look at my Halloween costume. Here's a selfie of me. I had an awesome dinner last night. You can't spend a lot of time on Syria. You just sort of get an accumulated experience of what this person is kind of about. And it does leave you kind of indifferent, you know? And if I can go back to the jogging, the Brad Trammell website, that's what they're talking about. It isn't one work that's a collage that you should spend time with. It's a constant stream that vies for attention, like, because we are in an attention economy, you know, where attention is a capital. That's why we're working to get likes or reblogs or, you know, attention.
Well, it sounds like the comment that you made, Deb, earlier about what we choose to filter out. I mean, there's that subtractive process too, and there's maybe less opportunity for that with some of the media that you're talking about.
It's very unsatisfying.
Yeah.
It's like it's very...
It flattens everything.
Yeah.
But I think you hit on a very important point, which is this issue of attention, time, engagement. I just think there's no getting around putting in the time. The more time you